So, episode 10, season finale of the Around the Table podcast. So excited to be with Mr. Jesse. Little backstory, and I'll let you talk about yourself just in a second, but you don't know this, but when I had first started going to Portico Young Adults, and I started, I think it was around July, August, and Colin was there, and I was really starting to warm up to Colin at the beginning, because I was like, oh, he's a cool guy, like he's got tattoos, funny guy type thing, and then like within week 3 or week 4, I'm hearing that he's leaving, like he announces he's leaving, and I was like, man, I was so like devastated. I'm like, just started coming here, like I like the atmosphere, I'm just getting like back into church for the first time, and like now everybody's moving. And Jonathan's like, nah, there's this guy Jesse coming, like he's a cool guy type thing. I'm like, bro, don't tell me that. I'm not even trying to hear that. Like there's no way. And then you come in over time, and then we start to talk, and I see a lot of the similarities, and I see a lot of like you and me and vice versa, which is why I was so excited to have this. So I guess we might as well just start there. Like, what do you do? Like, what do you do, and how did you actually come to get that role? Because it's almost like divine timing. The timing that you came and the timing that I started coming to Portico.
Definitely, definitely. Well, first of all, I'm really glad to be here. Appreciate you. Appreciate what you're doing here. So a little bit of background information as to how I became the young adults pastor is that I was actually working at Portico. Prior to that, and I was doing online, and then I was also, prior to that, I was working at the Milton campus.
Okay.
And so now a little bit of background information. It's crazy. Sometimes there are things that people do when they're 5 years old that, are kind of like, they kind of pass, right?
Yeah.
It's like they just do, it's like a little fad that they do or whatever, right? That kind of passes. And so, but sometimes it actually sticks to them. And so for me, I grew up to a mom and dad who were both pastors.
Okay.
And so, as a 5-year-old, so this would have been in the early years of like when they actually gave their lives over to Christ and stuff, and they started following him passionately, started leading, is that stuff was rubbing off on me. So I'd go to church, I'd see the pastor preach, and I'd come home and I'd like recite his sermons.
Really?
Yeah, 5-year-old just walking around with the Bible thinking he knows everything.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because I go back to sometimes those footages and I'm like, man, that's so weird that I'd be here right now. And so, long story short, for me, when that happened when I was 5, obviously you get a little bit older, I stopped doing that stuff.
Yeah.
But then it was actually 16 was when I actually got a hold of, like, I felt like it was like a life-changing experience that happened in my dad's church, where I experienced God. And then so from that point onwards, it was like I was being brought back to when I was a 5-year-old kid doing all that stuff, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'm meant to do this.
Yeah.
Maybe this is what I'm supposed to do, right? And so, and then so I started working so now a little bit, I'm sorry, I'm taking you through
don't worry.
So many different periods.
We'll start. We'll go back to the beginning.
But with Portico, I was teaching prior to that.
Okay.
And so I started working with Portico because of a good friend of mine who was working at the church. His name was Daniel Clark.
Okay.
And so we used to kind of like just be leaders at their young adults.
Okay.
At Portico. And we enjoyed it. Like, we enjoyed doing that there. Now, prior to that, we were at a church where we were doing that as well. So we wanted to kind of come along with what was happening there. And so he was being relocated to Milton to lead the Milton campus there. Yeah. And so Kamal and I, we felt that, well, we should probably go there as well. We wanted to go there as well. We loved them as a couple, and we just felt that that's where God was leading us. And then it turned out that, oh my gosh. So it turned out that, while we were there helping them out, I was lined up to teach phys ed. It would have been grade 7 and 8 phys ed. Yeah. It's the sweetest gig. Yeah. It was gonna be so nice. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to this. Went in for the interview, got the job. That summer I'm getting ready.
This is a school in Mississauga or in Milton?
This is in Hamilton.
Hamilton, okay.
So I'm getting ready to teach phys ed. And then it turns out that in order to stay on the board, you need a couple of things. And so one of the forms that I didn't fill out was an offense declaration form that pretty much says that you're not a criminal.
Yeah.
And so really all it was is just a check mark. That's all I had to do.
Yeah.
Submit it. And so that was the one form that I didn't submit. And that one form was actually what got me kicked out of the board, like off of the board. Because, and the only way I found out is because I tried to access my emails and I couldn't. And I'm like, yo, like what's going on?
Like you didn't know beforehand that you had to do this?
I did, but like it was like, I don't know where my mind was.
Yeah.
For some reason I just missed it, right? I just missed that I was supposed to do this.
Yeah.
And so this job lined up. I'm like, oh, like now I'm panicking because like it's three weeks away from me actually starting in this role.
Yeah.
And so they couldn't do anything. They said, well, you're gonna have to appeal. Like you're gonna have to wait. There's a long process. I was like, but I got a job starting up.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, we can't do anything about it. So that's how I got a really good gig that I ended up losing.
Jeez.
And so that was a moment where I was just like, man, like what is going on?
Yeah.
And so long story short, that October I actually started working for Portico.
As a result.
Well, it wasn't a result of that, but it felt like that was kind of like the direction as to where how things worked out, and I was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess this was kind of a blessing in disguise. Maybe I was meant to be here.
Yeah.
And then Colin leaving, and then I took over Young Adults, which was really cool, getting to know everybody there and stuff. But I knew some of the people there before, which is good. But
so yeah, let's start from the beginning. Where are you from? Where are your parents from? Give me a little background on who you are.
Sure. So I was born in the Middle East, a country called Bahrain. My dad's from Uganda. My mom's from India. And so my family had lived in Bahrain for 10 years. I was born there. My sister was born there. And then we moved to Canada in 94. The reason that we ended up there was because... So I'm going to give you the full...
give us the full picture.
There and why did these... kids end up in Bahrain in the Middle East. So, my dad from Uganda, he went to India to study.
Yeah.
He met my mom there. And so, they really hit it off. And they moved. They got married. They got married in India. They moved to Uganda.
Yeah.
And they had 2 kids there. So, my older siblings. At the time, my dad, I think, may have left out some important... Details as to what was going on, like the political climate in Uganda.
Yeah.
And so if anyone watching you're a little unaware as to what was going on, it was in the 80s. It was run by a dictator named Idi Amin. And so that kind of hit close to home because my uncle, my dad's brother, was actually in close proximity to him because of he would just work with him.
Yeah.
And so that kind of affected... just the entire dynamics of what was going on there.
Yeah.
And so it kind of hit home. And so my mom, at the time, she's like, let me try to get the family over to India. So she went back to India. She couldn't do it. While she was in India, a friend of hers said, listen, there's a really nice job in Bahrain. You could probably go over there and then get the family to leave Uganda in Bahrain. All right? So she goes to Bahrain. The job... that her friend was talking about was actually human trafficking. It was a human trafficking job. Yeah. And so she's there, and she's like, whoa, she realizes what's going on.
Yeah.
And so she escapes. Like, she actually leaves before the job even went through. She leaves in, the middle of the night. And she stumbles across a Catholic church. They were having an event taking place at the church. And... they're like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? Like, because she was just in this whole, panic frenzy. And so she tells them everything's going on while I was in India. I came here on a job. Turns out this is what the job is. My husband and my kids are in Uganda.
Still.
And this is what's going on. Right? So this is a span of, maybe a year or so. A year and a half, right? And at this time, she had been separated from my siblings. And so they were like... wow, okay, well, you can sleep here tonight, but let's try to look for ways that we can get the family over. And so, long story short, is they actually ended up doing that.
Jeez.
They got the family over.
Yeah.
And then a couple years later, I was born.
Yeah. Jeez.
So that's a little bit of a nutshell as to why I ended up there and why my family ended up there.
Jeez. Yeah. So I'm wondering because in today's climate, you don't see blacks and Indians together very often. So I'm wondering at the time, especially because you said he met her in India.
Yeah.
So that's more difficult turf, I would think, to marry.
And so even more difficult because the part of where my mom was from, the part of India. So my mom's Anglo-Indian.
Okay.
And so shout out to all my Anglo-Indian people watching here. Don't send me messages. This is not a shot on you, but
yeah, let's talk about it.
Anglo-Indians are they're very Anglo-Indians are very colonized by the British.
Yeah.
And so a lot of them gloat on the fairness of their skin.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And so they look at the rest of India like, we're a little bit more superior to you. They don't say it. Sometimes they might, but they don't say it. But that's kind of...
It's like light skins and...
That's what it is. You got it. There you go. So the fact that she not only did she got with someone that was... Because my dad was dark. Like he's Ugandan, but he's also got Sudanese blood in him, so he was dark.
Okay.
And so the fact that they fell in love and the fact that they got together was like, and so he heard it all. Like it was, and at the time it was rare, right? And
very,
The family was accepting, but the family was still like, he's the first black guy in the family. Yeah. So it was like, what do we like? Can I touch your hair? Like, right? Like,
we know those
figure out what that looks like, right? And then so when my dad, it's funny because when my dad took my mom to India, they were like, oh, like she's fair, like she's a very fair skinned person. So they had also that type of, so it was literally day and night meeting each other, bro. Like it was hilarious from the stories that they've told. So
and what was that like religious disparity like did she practice a certain religion in India, and did he practice a certain religion in Uganda?
I always said my mom was a little bit of a fake Indian. So my dad actually knew Hindi. He knew more of...
Really?
He knew Hindi more than my mom actually knew some of the words. And so he would he embraced the culture. My mom was, because Anglo-Indians are mostly like Catholics. Okay. So she wasn't really that heavy into like, say, like Hinduism, for example, right? And so my dad was actually an atheist. Okay. Yeah, so he wasn't a passive one. Like, you know, some people are like, they're passive atheists and stuff like that. But he was like he was a very proactive one. Like, he would actually write it on his dorm room that, like, God's dad. And, like, he would go out of his way to kind of take jabs at people who, believe that there was a God kind of thing, right? And so, he became a Christian shortly after that, but like I think in terms of like the culture was the biggest one for both of them. I think that was the biggest like, whoa, like
because I mean it still is now. Like you see it in Canada. I feel like because you have a lot of, especially like in the GTA, you have a lot of immigrants coming into the GTA, whether it be like Jamaican, Indians. I know Malton, where I'm from, is a lot of blacks and Indians, and you see that disparity more so between, say, the first generation that's come over than the second, because they've grown up in that environment where, you know, you're coming from India, you only grow up with Indians, or Africa, you only grow up with people from your country, and you come to the West and it's like, my kid's going to school with people from Italy, from India, from Pakistan, and all these different places. So that's, I find that very interesting, but because at the beginning you said that your parents are pastors, and at the beginning one is atheist and one is like passively like Catholic. So how does that happen?
So before we get that, one interesting fact that I should drop into that was while we were in Bahrain, I went to a school that's predominantly Indian, and so we were around a lot of Indian-speaking people. Okay. And so picture this: you got a group of kids at the time, would have been me, my older siblings, my sister was still young, and we all had these massive afros. Yeah. But we also had an Indian accent. You had an Indian accent. A strong one. You know how messed up I can't see that. Yeah, I can't see that. Absolutely. You have the head shape? I got the footage. You know what? I gotta go back. I gotta go back into the old archives. I wouldn't be surprised, but we had a strong Indian accent. Really? Okay. Oh, yeah, big time. So, but back to your question, you said... How did they become pastors from like where they started? Pastors? Oh my God. Yeah. So, so my mom is in Bahrain trying to figure all that, getting the family over. While she's in Bahrain, my dad's having his own episode with the two kids. Because he's still in Uganda. He's still in Uganda. Okay. And so there was a pastor in his village that was kind of like the pastor to everyone. Okay. He's still alive. This guy's like original
OG.
This guy was like hardcore into Christianity because people were targeting him. I'm talking about like witch doctors targeting him. He had been poisoned like 3 times. Like he was an intense Christian. Like, and so my dad, obviously, he would go to church with the family. They would hear some of these messages, and so where he was going, like what was happening in his life, he was around like in his late 20s, close to 30s. He was going through this moment. Okay, he's in a war situation, and it's like, God, if you're real, if you're ever gonna be real, you're gonna have to.
Today's the day, yeah.
And so there was an intense scenario that he had kind of described to us, that soldiers were pretty much passing through every house. They were raping women, they were killing people. You heard the gunshots, you heard the violence. There's a whole bunch of stuff taking place. And so he was with his kids. This one day, he was with his kids underneath their bed, and they were hiding. And he was trying to keep them.
That's your siblings.
This is my sibling, yeah. And so he's trying to keep them quiet so the soldiers don't come into the house.
Yeah. And
so while he's going through this, he's like God, like protect my family. Right? The God that he didn't believe in, protect my family, right? And so the way he described it was the soldiers pretty much went through every single house and it passed their house. And so so they were actually untouched from what could have been really bad.
And they heard the screams of all the
screams, they're hearing all that stuff. And so he's like, I'm gonna start to take this to I'm gonna see how I'm gonna see what this looks like, because this is like there's got to be something more to this, right? And so he started his journey of faith. And so he started his journey of faith at the time. My mom was a very devoted Catholic, and so they kind of had talked through. So he was new Christian, she was a Catholic, and while we were in like post Civil War in Uganda, they're now in Bahrain, and Bahrain was kind of like a way for them to be like, okay, we can focus in on our careers and our life, our family. We can take a deep breath, and we can actually start to explore this faith a little bit more. And so at the time, there was a guy that lived above the apartment that would. So what he would do is he would get tons of. I think he was Sri Lankan, I can't remember, but he would get tons of Christian material, and he would actually take it over to remote places and villages in Sri Lanka.
Jeez. And
give people people that want to know more about God, he would give them these resources, so VHS tapes of like just pastors and teachings and stuff about the Bible. And so he lived just right above our apartment, and so he would do the same thing with my dad and my mom, and and then they started joining a church. They got really connected there, and then long story short, they were serving at the church. My dad was, by the time we left Bahrain in '95, my dad was preaching there at the church, and then when they came here, it was more along the lines of like, okay, how can we focus in on, continuing with that passion and building a church and stuff. So.
Jeez, and you had mentioned at one of your talks at YA that your family's been through 2 civil wars.
Yeah.
So Uganda's the first one.
So it's interesting. So the second one was actually the Gulf War.
Okay.
And so at this time it was a little bit different because now they have their faith that they can lean on. And so we weren't really heavily involved. We were just in the around in the 90s when it would have been the early 90s when the Civil War was taking place. The Gulf War was taking place between Iraq and Iran. Bahrain was like right there in the middle. Right, and so my mom at the time worked for the American Embassy, and so they provided us with, and so there's actually a picture of me as a kid in this gas mask and stuff like that. And they provided the family with gas masks and stuff, and so we were in between that, and so any wrong move could have literally just wiped out our area and our region because stuff was just flying over us.
Jeez.
And so that was another moment of for my parents where they were like, okay, well, we went through this, in Uganda, and now we're kind of in the middle of this now, Bahrain and stuff. I was a kid at the time.
How old were you?
Roughly? This would have been around 92. I was around maybe 2 and a half. 2?
Okay, so
I don't remember as much. I'm just going based off.
But the Indian accent, you remember?
Oh, the Indian accent was strong.
And why Canada out of all countries?
Canada, it was either Canada or Australia.
Okay.
And we got they got accepted into Canada, so we're like, all right, let's go to Canada. And so, and plus a lot of people had talked about how, Canada's a nice place, and Canada's this, it's cold, it's a nice place, right? And so, we came to Canada, all 4 kids, and my parents. We all had afros. My sister was a little baby at the time. She had a little afro, and we all had thick Indian accents.
Jeez, and you moved to...
We moved straight to Mississauga.
Straight to Mississauga. Okay, so you started in Mississauga.
I started.
So you're a Saga kid at heart. We hear that.
I lived in a place called Rochecourt, Sheridan, near Sheridan Mall.
Sheridan Mall.
So
where is that?
Sheridan Mall. Well, it's being rebuilt right now. It's right off of the QEW, off of Air Mills Parkway.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you started off there.
Rochecourt was tough. It was rough back then.
Okay, so
I don't know if it is right now, but Rochecourt was, you put sticky paper out.
Yeah.
You find cockroaches. You find a mouse. You find all kinds of stuff. It was just hidden treasure, man. You wake up in the morning, you're like, what are we gonna find?
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Jeez. Okay. So are you guys in an apartment or are you in a house?
We were in an apartment.
You're in an apartment. So there's 5 of you.
There was 6 of us.
6 of us.
Yeah.
And how many? Like 6 bedrooms?
6? No. I wish. It was like, we found a 3-bedroom.
3-bedroom. Okay.
So at the time, my sister was a baby, so she was in my parents' room. My older sister, she had her own room. My brother was still cheese that. My brother and I, we shared a room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
and
lovely.
Yeah. So between me and my brother is 7 years apart, but we would hang out.
Yeah, you made it work. Made it work.
No,
similar situation to me when we moved apartment building in Malton. I think I shared a room with my brother. My sister shared a room because 4 siblings, 2 parents, so house of 6. So same thing. So I know exactly how it goes.
There you go.
I want to take you to the pastor's kids because this is a very interesting topic. Yeah, we're going there. Wow. So I have a couple friends like Debbie, for instance.
Yeah.
Pastor's kids. I have another friend named Josh. His dad is a pastor and these kind of things. And I don't know why this is the case. I would understand more if I was in that position, but like pastors' kids never want to be pastors.
No, not at all.
But you're a pastor.
Yeah.
So
ironic.
What happened?
I try to run from this thing.
Oh, okay. So talk about that.
So you're right. Pastors' kids never want to be pastors for the right reasons. I think a lot of it it's a combination of stuff, right? Like the parents are pretty much they're usually in a public space and they're helping and serving other people. And so sometimes it's exhausting, it's draining for a lot of pastors, and so pastors' kids at times usually they take the hit of it all. And so depending on every person is different. Like I know what happened in our family is that like if you talk to like my siblings, they were like, my brother was polar opposite. He's like, I wanted nothing to do with the church. I want nothing to do with this lifestyle that we got going on here because it was a lot, right? And so for me, my moment of, I was going down that path where I wanted nothing to do with the church as well. And then when I was 16 years old, I experienced God's presence. Don't know how else to explain it. It was a very supernatural, outside of my control.
Before you go there, what was happening before 16 that made you not want to be?
So before I was just like to me it was just religion. I didn't want to do it, right? My parents did that, and plus there was like a lot of there was different restrictions, right, in terms of like how we have to carry ourselves, and even though it was unspoken, it was kind of still there, right? And it was a lifestyle that I was trying to get away from. And so I just didn't, it's not like, sorry, I shouldn't say that I was like, I hate it. It's not that I hated it. I just didn't want that for my life. Plus at the time you're 15, so there's so much stuff that's more
and I'm assuming your like middle school friends, your elementary, high school friends are doing one thing, and then your parents are saying, no, we can't do that. You have to do a different thing, and you don't know why.
Absolutely. I have to sneak out to parties. I have to sneak out
we know.
I was like, man, how can I, what is the excuse I can come up with that can kind of, you know?
Oh, we know.
And so it was, I just didn't want anything to do with it. Like it wasn't appealing to me. It was just boring. Like straight up, it was just boring. And so, like that's what our church experience was like. I mean, that's what my church in terms of like when I was a teenager. But then again, I'm also in this rebellious stage too, right? And so I think it was a combination of that. Yeah.
And you said your older brother wanted nothing to do with it.
Yeah, he from the get-go, he's like, "Yup, not doing that. I'm doing this." And so he was a little bit more like outspoken when it came to that. And so but it was a tough time too, right? Like, I mean, you gotta like, I always think back at my brother coming to the country versus me coming to the country. So I'm a 5-year-old kid with an Indian accent. This dude's a grade 8. Yeah. Coming in with an Indian accent.
And like, doesn't look Indian.
Oh my gosh. So they're like, already as it is, my parents, they're trying to figure out what Canada's all about. They're trying to figure out the culture. Yeah. There's so many things that they don't even know of. My siblings, they're trying to figure out some stuff. And so I guess with him, where my brother was at, is it's like, look, I don't have time for church. Yeah. I'm just trying to figure out where my place is with all of, trying to socialize and, through high school and stuff. And so I think that was a little bit of a combination as to where he was at.
And then 16, so you say 16, that's the big year for you.
16 was a big, December. I remember it to this day, December 23rd, 2005. Y'all can do the math as to how old I am right now. 2005. It happened I'd always seen people go up for prayer in my parents' church. The funny thing is, I didn't even hear the message. I never listened to it. I would just be in the back, right? Yeah. And so I told myself, I was like, you know what? 2 days away from Christmas, let me go up for a blessing.
Was there anything else going on that like provoked you to that decision, or was it just one of those random?
Well, I will say this. So that happened December. I was so our youth leader at my dad's church at the time took a bunch of us to this conference, and it was called High Energy. It was a youth conference. And so I went to this youth conference, and I was in the back, and I was like, and I grew up in this, right? Yeah. So I'm in the back, and I'm watching all these kids like just get super like static over this, right? Yeah. Hands are lifted.
Yeah. Trust me.
Doing all that stuff. And I was like, all right, let me go up there. Like, let me walk up and I'll join them. I'm not gonna be back here, right?
Just hands
crossed. So I went up there, and so there was this one song called "Our God is an Awesome God." So I'm like, let me do this, right? Because I'm seeing everyone doing this. Let me do this. And it was so weird. I don't know why. I started like a tear went down my eye, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? This is weird. Like, why am I crying? Yeah. This is weird. I was like, okay, snap out of it, right? And so that happened, but I kind of like skimmed over that even happened. It was just always like that was weird. Yeah. I didn't make myself cry. I don't know why it started. Why it happened. And then so that was kind of I feel like that was kind of a way of like a setup to what I would experience. Okay. December 23rd, 2005.
Okay, so you go for a blessing.
Yeah. And I was like, let me so I was like, let me go up for prayer. You know, my dad would pray for people. I was like, let me go up there for prayer. Yeah. Don't know what the service was about, didn't hear a message, didn't hear one word. Let me just go up there. And so I go up there. And so it was crazy. I walk up there, and then out of nowhere, my legs start like shaking. Like it actually starts like, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? I'm like, oh, maybe I'm nervous. Yeah. I'm like, but there's no reason to be. I know these people. This is not like, right? And so maybe I'm nervous and stuff. And so, but then it keeps on going. And so it keeps on going through my legs, and it keeps on going through my hands. And so at the time, I didn't have words for it to describe what it is. Later on, I actually was able to understand a little bit as to what that experience was. But long story short is I fall on the ground. And so I don't know for anyone watching it, maybe if you come from a Pentecostal or a pretty charismatic church, you kind of seen this stuff happen. And so I've seen this stuff happen. And in my mind, I was like, when my body started to shake the way it shook, I was like, I'm not going to fall on the floor and look like an idiot. Yeah. You're not going to get me. You're not going to get me.
Because you're 16, right?
I'm 16. And I'm holding on to my pride. I'm holding on to my dignity. I'm holding on to like, no, you're not going to put me on the ground. Yeah. And it's just not happening. But the crazy thing is, nobody was even like, it was just, nobody was even doing it. Nobody was even near me. I'm just up there. I'm just standing, right? And so, long story short, I actually ended up on the ground, and I was there for an hour and a half, stuck on the ground. And there's a clip that actually proved that happened. To this day, that was recorded. Somebody recorded me on the ground.
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half, and I was crying like I cried at that youth conference.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what the heck is going on? And I just felt like, at the time, I just felt like there was this like giant hand inside me just cleaning me out. And so I got up and I was like, whoa, that was weird.
Mm-hmm.
That was different. How do I explain this?
Yeah.
Like, how do I explain this to my friends? How do I talk to them about this?
Yeah.
Right? And so that was grade 11. I remember from that point onwards, I was very curious to know as to what that experience was.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I would open the Bible, it was the first time I actually intentionally went out of my way to pick up the Bible and read it.
Mm-hmm.
And as I started to read throughout the Bible, I started to discover that a lot of people had experienced similar encounter. And I talked to other people who had similar encounters and stuff. And so it started off in a very unorthodox and a very, I would say to a lot of people, weird way.
Yeah.
As to how that happened. And so ever since then, I always think back to that time. My life hasn't been the same since.
And then you go into pastoring right after?
No, so I was 16. So from 16 to 18, I got very passionate over that experience. I got very passionate over the Bible. Mm-hmm. And so I probably didn't go about this the right way, but I actually cut away from a lot of my friends in high school.
In high school?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't mean to do it. It's just that because at the time where a lot of them were headed, and where I knew I was headed, I knew I had to make a change.
And how important do you think that is? Because that's a difficult decision.
I had to at the time, a girl that I was dating saw that, I was like this Christian weird guy.
Were you dating her when you had this experience? Sorry?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we broke up. She broke up with me.
After
at the
that.
time. Yeah. Well, because it was just weird. Like, we were just different. Right?
Yeah.
And so I was trying to explain that to a lot of my friends at the time, just like, guys, I don't know if I want to come out there. I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if right? And so I just ended up becoming this, like, oh, whatever. Like, you think you're too good or you're too this or too that, right? And so, but then I knew that I had to make those decisions. And so from 16 to 18 were 2 solid years of my life where, I kid you not, I would literally leave school, come home, and I would go in my bedroom, and I would read my Bible, and I would spend time in my bedroom at least 6 to 10 hours, no word of an exaggeration. 6 to 10 hours I just spent time just reading the Bible, praying. I even had to, it was a lot of the stuff was new to me. I didn't know how to pray. I didn't know how to go about this. And so, I would just spend that time just taking in, just reading the Bible and trying to study the Bible, and I'd have a dictionary. Because prior to that, I used to have it would be considered a learning disability.
Yeah.
And so, parents would hook me on phonics and stuff like that. So,
oh wow,
I used to
throwback phonics.
Phonics.
Oh, that's throwback.
I'm telling you.
Jeez, I remember that is.
A lot of painful summers. Painful
phonics.
Summers, bro.
Jeez.
Painful summers.
Yeah.
Doing phonics and assignments and projects that my mom would assign for me, which I hated at the time, just because I was just so bad at school.
Yeah.
And so, when I became Christian, I would have my Bible, but then I'd also have a dictionary, and then I'd also have this other study Bible that I borrowed from my dad, and I'd be highlighters and a pen.
Is it like a King James version, and you're trying to use?
It was a King James, New King James version.
Okay.
But still a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
It was New King James.
Still a thou and a
I'm trying to
ye
figure out,
all these words.
I'm trying to figure out words, and I'm trying to figure out also historical content. I'm trying to figure out all this because I'm like, yo, this has to be real.
Yeah.
Right. If this is this has to be real, right? And so I went through that. I don't even want to call it phase because I'm still at that place right now where I still have a passion for it. Yeah. But it was those 2 years were actually very helpful for me to do it, even though I cut away from my friends because at the time my dad was actually sick.
Sick with?
He was sick with cancer.
Oh, okay.
And so
And you learned this at 16?
16, 17, while I was going in my room praying, I would come out and then I would kind of care for my dad with my mom.
Oh, okay.
And so he had been through 2 aneurysms at the time. What I didn't realize was that what he was going through and the way he would actually pass, because he would pass away when I was 18, so 2 years I would say 2007 is when he passed away. That actually prepared me for the way he died. And I can explain to you how he died.
Yeah,
but it actually prepared me, like, spending those 2 years, even though it felt like a very radical, fanatic, I'm cutting the rest of the world out of my life, and I'm just going to spend time going to school, coming home, eating, and then just spending time reading the Bible. Those 2 years actually prepared me to handle the trauma that would come from his death.
Jeez.
So
actually, before you get there, I want to go back to the severity of decision, because like what you said you've done in high school, that is not an easy thing to do. And if we talk to high schoolers now, that is something a lot of them struggle with. So I'm wondering, what is the decision making process like? Like, are you looking at, like, if I stay with them, this is where I go, and if I don't, this is where I end up? Like, what are the alternatives for you as far as making these decisions? Because it's one thing to think about and say, I can say for years, man, I need to cut these people off, or I need to go a different way, but actually having that conversation or doing it is completely different. So how did you go about doing that?
So already as it is, I already knew that even when I would go to certain parties and I would be in certain spaces, I already knew that I was like, I shouldn't be here. I already knew that. I was just ignoring it. But when that moment happened, I was like, okay, like, you didn't just, like, this didn't just happen for your own personal gain. Like, this happened so that you could actually turn your life around, and so that something good can come out of it. It wasn't easy, because I got made fun of. And I was with a group of people. We were all the popular kids. We would be the ones making fun of other people. So when I was on the other side of the spectrum, where I was, like, the one that was actually the butt of the joke, I was just like, man, like, this is tough. And so I would say one of the things that helped my decision was I would say the privilege. I don't even know how to put it, but I had the privilege of seeing other people go down a path that I knew I was headed down. And so that kind of scared me. And so that's why I was able to kind of make that. Now, I tried to still maintain a lot of those relationships. You
wanted to live, say, two different...
I tried to, and I remember this one time I went to we used to have a club opened up by... in Oakville called Rehab. And I went there.
Rehab, that's the name of the club?
That was the name of the club. I didn't want to still live, and I'm dating myself. I don't even think it's still out there. It was close to movie theater. At the time, the movie theater was AMC. Not AMC anymore. But so I remember I went there, and I was like, I shouldn't be here. Like, I just felt like throwing up. I felt like I shouldn't be there. Now I'm not saying everyone should be at that place. But that's just where I was at. And so there was a couple of things that kind of made me feel like I have to make a very, like, if I keep prolonging this, I'm not going to make the decision. So I had to just, like, cut it cold turkey. Even though I felt like I didn't do it the best way possible, because some people kind of interpret it as like, oh, you just don't want to be our friend or whatever, right? But I felt like for where my future was headed, I had to kind of take that radical. It scared me enough to make a radical decision.
So how would you have done it now, looking back?
How would I have done it?
Yeah, how would you have done it?
See, that's the other thing. Is like, I don't know if I would have done it any other way. Because I feel like it's almost like if someone's on fire in this room, God forbid. But if someone caught on fire right now and they're yelling and they're screaming, you don't care where you're getting the water from. You're just dumping water on them. You care less about the sneakers that they're wearing. You care less about the clothes they're wearing. Right? You can care less about the feelings because you're just trying to put the fire out. That's what I would compare me putting the fire out to. It's like, I don't know if I would have done it any other way, because it was a sense of urgency to put the fire out. And the sense of urgency was why I made the decision to say, hey, I can't hang out with you. I can't do it. Right? And so... I think one thing I would have done is, so going back to my experience, a lot of this stuff was new to me, so I didn't have language for it. Then I have like I have language for it now. I didn't know how to communicate it. And I didn't know how to actually explain it to what had actually happened. And so I would just tell people straight up. Like, I would be very blunt. I was very direct, very blunt. And I would just tell them straight up that, like, hey, man, what you're doing right now is that's gonna take you down a path where, right? Like, I would just straight up tell them that. And so a lot of people don't like hearing that, right?
Oh,
like,
definitely. Especially in high school.
Like, hold up. Who are you to talk to me that way, first of all?
You ever got any fights for that?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
Surprisingly, I didn't. I'm shocked that I didn't then. But, like, I would just tell people straight up, and so that came off. And now looking back, and I'm like, that can come off a little arrogant. That can come off a little, like, not considerate of where people are coming from and stuff. And so I would kind of just shoot for it and just go for it. And so if there's anything I would change, it would definitely be the way of how I communicated, as opposed to what I communicated.
And then the girlfriend, because that's a tough thing, or was a tough thing, I'm assuming.
It was a tough thing.
Especially in high school. Like, you start dating a girl, you already see like a future, I'm assuming. You probably had already seen like a future with her. And then to kind of cut that off, or did you not?
I kind of didn't. That's the crazy thing. Is, like, I didn't even consider future. Like, I didn't even consider like what it was gonna look like in the years to come. But I knew, I was like, oh yeah, like I knew that, like I liked her and she liked me, and you know it was a high school relationship, and so there's a lot of lust involved in that.
Yeah. We hear you.
And so, but it just took a jab at my pride, man, because like she broke up with me. So I was like,
did you have to rewrite the story?
I don't know, man. Like it was tough not to. Like it was like her breaking up with me, even though it was probably wasn't. I'm like it wasn't even a big deal. Yeah. To be honest with you, to like maybe coming from where she was coming from, but where I was coming from is that like it was almost like another indication that like saying yes to Jesus will actually cost you. Like it costs you a lot of stuff, and it actually doesn't feel good. Like there are moments where it does feel good, but making the tough decisions won't feel good, and you actually like I felt like a loser. I felt like a straight up loser during that season of my life, and so that was I think more than anything else, that was kind of like where I was at motion. I was just like, man, like I'm kind of salty about that. I'm gonna try to. And it's funny because I never even talked about it for the longest time. I never told people that part of the story. Because like I was still dealing with like the whole like I'm not gonna say somebody broke up with me. Yeah. I'd be the one to break up with you. Yeah, You know what I mean? Like I didn't even want to like I always kept that part out.
Oh, okay. So your father passes away. So what does that do to you?
Oh my gosh. So he one morning. My mom yelled. So prior to that, he had an aneurysm behind his knee, so he was in bed and stuff. He was sick. He had this massive growth behind his knee. And so my mom yells one day. She's like, "Hey Jesse, like come up, like quick." Like,
were your siblings?
Sorry?
Where are your siblings?
So my sister was at school. I was 18 years old, and I was just in the transition of going to either college. I was still kind of figuring out, but I was at home. I was living at home. Yeah. My older siblings, they're married. They have their kids. They're not there. So it was pretty much my mom, my dad, and I living. Like we were in the house at the time because my younger sister was at school. And so she starts freaking out, and she's like yelling for me to come upstairs. Like she's like, "Come down!" Like I can hear. I'm like, "Oh, this is not good." Yeah. And I'm like, I'm aware that he's sick. I'm like, what happened? Maybe something happened. I go there, and it was like a murder scene. So it was that growth behind his leg. Yeah. Explodes. And so I find anything I can to kind of stop the bleeding, but he lost 80% of his blood in his
And you saw
bedroom,
that.
And I'm watching him. And so my dad is like literally on the bed, and at one point while he's losing oxygen, I'm securing his knee and his leg from bleeding. He kind of like raises up, he looks up at me dead in my eyes, and I'm looking at him while I'm doing that. Yeah. And I have to keep it like, I can't, like I have to be strong for because my mom's freaking out. She's running, she's calling an ambulance, she's going nuts, right? And so, but then he looks at me, and so he goes back down. And so the ambulance comes in. At the time, they try to revive him. So I'm seeing them. They're reviving him. They're trying to do something to get him back to life. By then, he's in the ambulance. They're still trying to do it. And then he gets to the hospital. That's where he passed away. He lost 80% of his blood at that time. And so, if I can tell you about any person, like, and so that's why I always credit it to, I'm happy that I had taken those 2 years to spend time with, because it gave me a way on how to feel and how to think. I'm not saying that I didn't feel. Yeah. Because you got to go through, whoever's watching, grief. You go through, you got to grieve because it's unhealthy to not. And, but at the moment, I was trying to be strong for my mom, I was trying to be strong for people, but it gave me a way on how to actually deal with the trauma of what had happened. And so none of my siblings had seen that. Yeah. Him pass away. They knew he passed away. But like the actual trauma that came from, I'm talking about the jogging pants I had some of his blood on it and blood on the walls and stuff. Like it was intense. It was an intense situation.
And what does that do to you mentally?
Yeah, like I'm surprised that that didn't actually push me over that ledge. And it did it. Like I think one of the things that, so ready as it is, I was in this space of like, I knew when I was 18, I knew that God was going to call me to full-time ministry. Yeah. To some capacity. Hence why a lot of my hunger towards reading the Bible was taking place in the study. I knew that was going to happen. And so when I saw that, the only way I can actually process what was going on was that, like, I actually thought for the longest time, I was like, no, there's no way he's going to come back to life in the hospital room. So it took, I was the last one to actually process that he had passed away. And so it took me 5 years to actually accept that he had passed away, because I had to be so much of a strong pillar for my family. And so 5 years later is when I actually started to grieve that he had passed away. And so during those 5 years, I didn't really, like, I didn't have a mental breakdown. I didn't really feel the way I felt. I was just going off of a lot of, if you want to call it maybe adrenaline, just going off of what had happened, you know, in my experience as a 16-year-old. But it also helped me. But then when I went through that time 5 years later, I was able to actually process and kind of like replay some certain moments and kind of like get healing through that.
Because I find typically when, and I can probably say the same for myself, when people decide to either like ignore their pain, they find a way to anesthetize it. Like the same way, you know, an emergency, a doctor will, you know, use anesthesia or a painkiller. So I'm wondering, during that 5 years, are you finding ways to anesthetize it? Like, is it school you're focusing on? Are you like single-mindedly focused on one thing during that 5 years?
I was pretty focused on God's calling me to build a church. Okay. And that's where I was focused on. And so I spent a lot of those years just studying the Bible and studying. Now here's the thing, is it's not that I was avoiding dealing with the trauma, but I just knew that I had to be the voice. I felt like this responsibility to be a voice of reason and just a voice of comfort to the rest of my family. Okay. Because my sister at the time was grade 8. She was 13. Jeez. And my mom was going through an intense mental breakdown, which actually resulted in her moving with my sister to Australia and living with her sister. And so for at least a year, within those 5 years, a year and a half, I was actually homeless.
Really?
Yeah. And so at the time, I wasn't really processing what was going on. Like, I never really was comparing my situation to someone else's. Like, I don't know what it was, but like, it never hit me that like, oh man, like your situation's kind of trash right now. Like, it never dawned on me. I think maybe, if you want to call it, like, I was very just head in the clouds, focused in on how is this going to translate to where you're leading me, God. Right? Like, I was like, I don't even know why that's how I was thinking. Yeah. But that's kind of like where I was at mentally with all of it.
So you're saying, is it right after your mom and your sister moved to Australia? And then are you not living anywhere, or are you just...
So I was living with my buddy, close family friends. I was living with him, and so I spent some time with him, and then from there I went to another friend's house and I lived there. But I had my clothes in garbage bags for quite some time. And so my mom had offered, she said, hey, come with us to Australia. And I said I didn't want to do it. And I said, no, I'm going to stay here because I feel like maybe I should stay here.
And they sold the place?
So my mom sold the house. The church that was run by both my parents, they closed that church down. And so she moved with my younger sister to Australia, lived there for some time.
And then, like, how was that conversation? Because you said you're living at your buddy's place. Like, how was that conversation? Is it, hey, can I crash at yours? Or
no, they were like close family friends and stuff. So it was like, for them, they were so hospitable. They're like, hey, oh yeah, you're living with us. Like, that's what they said. Yeah. And I was like, okay, sure. And so he was kind of like, he was one of those guys that like is kind of like a friend, but he's more like a brother because I'd known him ever since he was like, we were in grade 6, right? And so I lived there for some time, and so even while I'm there, I'm still trying to. spending time reading the Bible, spending time praying, spending time getting a hold of just certain, resources and reading material. And he was headed to York University, he headed to college, and I wasn't doing that.
Yeah, you had no plans.
I didn't know where this was gonna go. I really didn't know where this was gonna go, and so I had no plans. But I knew sooner or later, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to do something.
Yeah.
And so maybe that was my way of grieving through all that was going on. And so they were very gracious. They gave me space. They gave me that space to grow. They gave me that space to grow. They gave me that space to kind of, mature in that sense.
Jeez. Wow. Yeah. So when does your wife come into the picture?
Oh, so she comes 2009, 2010. So 2 years after my dad had passed away.
Oh, so 2 years after, that's when you meet her.
2 years after.
Okay.
And so at this point, so I joined a church that the pastor of that church was good friends with my dad. And so I felt at ease to join his church. And so I joined the church, and instantly the way they treated me was like as if I was I was in my late 20s when I was in my early 20s. Yeah. And so they gave me responsibilities over lead the youth because there's something that you right in terms of what you're going through and and so I would always hear that it's man, how are you going through this? And I'm like, I would have no way to explain it, but I'm like, so they put me in that position of leadership. And so Camilla was actually, close family friends of ours would come to that church. Okay. And so the girl said, I'm going to invite my friend over to the youth group. So we had this big bowling event. Yeah. We had over 60, 50 something people I had never met before. They came out to this bowling event. Yeah. And so Camilla actually came out. She was invited by my close family friend who was attending the church at the time. And so we ran across, and I was like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. It wasn't, I didn't really, because I was like, I'm leading. Yeah. I'm not even thinking, in my mind, I was like, if I get married, I'm probably gonna get married. It's probably in my late 20s, 30s. It's just not where my focus was at. Yeah. Right. And so, but she says that she told her friend that that's my husband.
That's the same day.
Yeah. She's like she didn't tell the same day. Yeah. But she felt that she knew that that was the guy that God, that she was gonna get married to me. And then she had conversations with her friend, and she's like, hey, yeah. So how does that develop? So then, long story short, one day our friends are like, hey, we're gonna jam out, because we would do that all the time. We'd have jam out in my buddy's basement. Someone would be on the guitar, drums, and so I would sing songs. I kind of worship. Yeah, I've seen. Yeah. So they're like, oh, Camilla's coming too, and I was like, oh, cool. And in my mind, I'm I don't know much about Camilla. I don't know that if she's a Christian. I didn't know that. I was like, oh, that's cool. They're like, oh yeah, she sings. And so I do this one song. It's a song by Hillsong called "With Everything." And so it just happened that they were like, hey, you guys should do a duet to that.
That's a setup,
bro. I'm not focused. I'm like, oh, whatever, sure. Yeah. Because in my mind, I'm like, I would be shocked that she even knows this song, because in my mind, I'm not thinking that she's even in part of this, the space, right? Yeah. This Christian space, right? And so we start doing this duet together. We start singing this song. I'm like, man, this girl's good. But then I'm singing this song, and I'm like, this is pretty interesting. Yeah. It was, oh man, this was cheesy Disney moment, right? But it was it was interesting, and I'm like, and then so we started talking after that, and I'm like, she's a pretty cool girl. And so we started talking after that, we started talking, and it was almost like we just developed a friendship.
And you're still at your close friend's place at this point in time?
No, at this time I am now renting at a place.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, okay.
But I'm renting at a place, and so I'm at my buddy's basement. That's where we jam out, and I'm at my dad's friend's church. Okay. And I'm leading the youth there. And so so we just develop a relationship, and we start talking, and I was like, man, she's very down to earth and stuff, and so and then we started dating. Jeez. Yeah, we started dating and stuff, and So we talked about, like, I told her everything that I told you about my life.
Yeah.
She told me everything about... And I will say something which is also interesting, that Camilla's from Chile.
Yeah.
And so her parents had also gone through...
the civil war, the dictatorship,
Pinochet. And so there was, like, between the three of us, it's like 3 wars. It was like, whoa, like...
That's what we're bonding up.
Yeah. So we talked
You got a dictator, I got a dictator.
Hey, marriage! No. Bringing refugees together.
Yeah.
That's how that happens. No. So yeah, you know what though? One of the things that took really was an eye opener for me, because I was like, even when we started developing this relationship, I was like, God, is this the woman you have for me?
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it was because I told her, I was like, hey, so listen, I've lost a lot of friends over this Christian thing. And so this is what I actually see myself doing for the rest of my life. I'm going to go into full-time ministry. And I don't know if I'm going to lead a church, but I'm going to go into full-time ministry. And that's not everyone can sign up for that lifestyle, but even if you're a Christian person, you just don't expect people to sign up for that lifestyle. And so I let her know. I was like, hey, this is where I'm at. And then her response was like, that's awesome. That's actually where... And I was like, wait, what? Like, you're not shutting that down?
Yeah.
Because
had it been shut down before?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And so, who I will not name.
Yeah, of course.
There was an individual that... We weren't dating, but there was an individual where I had... At the church at the time, one of the youth... Because I was a youth. Where I'd considered that we were, we were like, I was like, oh, maybe she's the one for me, right? And I mentioned that, and they were like, no. And she was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. That's my She's like, she just shut it down. And I'm like, okay, well, that's my answer right there. Yeah. But Camilla was like, no, that's actually kind of along the lines of where I feel I'm headed. And so. It was a lot of stuff that came natural. Yeah. Camilla was the first person I never had to put on for. And she'll say the same thing about me as well. She never had to put on, I was just myself. And then I met her family. Her family was nice, and her family was really generous. They took me in. I was 20 years old at the time. And so, it's been quite the journey. But definitely it was one of those moments where I was like, okay, well, God, you put us together. Yeah. I knew I was not going to get married as young as we did get married. I was 23 at the time when I did get married. Yeah. She was 21. And so the rest is history, man. We got a kid and we got another one coming on the way.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So then, so I'm wondering, because, and I think that's a good topic to talk about, relationships, because that's something that there's a lot of muddy water around. People aren't sure because either they don't have good examples at home, and if I can't find a model where I am, I have to look for it elsewhere, and that might be on social media, that might be on TV, it might be wherever, because I'm desperate. I'm trying to find something that I can copy, and if I don't find something, then inevitably maybe I might just copy my parents, and that may or may not be what I want, but I don't even know what I want. So I'm wondering, is that something you wrestled with? Is that something you struggled with, in the relationship space?
I did, because the biggest challenge for me, so why it was important. So when I went through that breakup with that girlfriend, that girl that I was dating, I hated it, but it was also good for me because it gave me some time to actually be okay with me and to know who I was, figure out my identity before I can now bring someone else into it, right? And so prior to when I was in high school, I was dating someone, I didn't know who I was. That's why, so you even asked me that question. Did you see a future? No, I didn't, because I didn't know where I was headed. I didn't know what my identity was. And so now when I'm dating Camilla, it's completely different, or I'm able to ask questions centered on, this is who I am. This is my identity. I'm secure in my identity. I don't have to prove anything. And so I think the biggest thing is when you have to rush into a relationship, you make a lot of bad decisions, right? And so I think sometimes a lot of people, they're so zealous to be with someone. Yeah. But really, if you go deep down into where they're coming from, is that they're just really afraid to be alone, right? And so a lot of people get into relationships or get into certain interactions not based off of the other person, but it's just based off of their own fears. They just don't want to be alone. or they may be of the perception, or there's a bunch of stuff that gets lumped in with that, or maybe they feel like, well, where I'm at in my life, this needs to happen, and so they just try to fill in the gaps, right?
Kind of like a script.
Yeah, right? And so, like, you lump in relationships, no different than, well, this is where I should be in my career. Well, this is where I should be, so it's like, I feel like at times, especially in our culture, we're moving in that kind of a way, where it's like, well, check mark, the next thing. And so, at the same time, you gotta be the right person to find the right person.
That's important.
Right? Because everyone's focusing on finding the right person, but they're not even practicing being the right person. And so, whatever you actually end up attracting, what you
are, not what you want.
Exactly. And so, you're gonna have plenty of options. I'm sure when you are focused on, who you are, who you're called to be. You're gonna have many of different options. People are genuine. Honestly, people are usually attracted to that.
Yeah.
Right. Like when you're secure in your, and I'm not saying you don't go through bad days or insecure. I'm not saying you don't go through that. But like to be able to have, proper headspace, proper direction as to where you're going,
or to have a bad day and not let it knock you down.
Yeah, right. And so most people are genuinely they gravitate to that. And so I think a lot of that has I think that has to do with like in terms of like I think in our culture we gotta focus more on just figuring out who we are before we lump someone else into this life that we haven't even figured out yet. And now there's a lot of confusion, hurt, pain, and a whole bunch of stuff that comes with it, right?
And even when you talk about figuring out who you are and spending time by yourself, does being alone equal isolation to you? Is that essentially what it looks like? Is it me isolating myself? Because because I've seen. Okay, now I'll give you an example. Because I'll see now, and this is something you've seen too, where it's like I just cut everything cold turkey. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I know I need to be alone. But like being alone is only part of it. Yeah. What is the other part of it?
So you need moments where you're alone, so that you can actually reflect. You can refine, you can redefine, right? But then the next part of it is actually you got to get out there. You got to get out there, and you have to take whatever you've received in moments of your aloneness. You need to be able to put some stuff into practice.
Okay.
But when you, first of all, I think isolation can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. And so if you're isolating from something, I think that can be a bad thing because you're escaping. But if you're isolating to something, that's a completely different headspace. What are you isolating to? Right? So even for me, like in my moments of, if you want to call it isolation, it was not that I was running away from something, but I was running to something. So I was running to more time spent in the Bible, more time spent with God. I was running to, so I was investing, I was already throwing and investing my life into this. And so because of that, to them, it seemed like I was isolated. But to me, it was like, no, I'm investing. Right? And so I think every person needs to kind of go through that, where they're able to kind of figure out who they are. Now, I'm a pastor. I'm always going to look at it through the filter of your identity in Christ. Yeah. Right? And that's just how I understand the world. That's just how I see the lens that I see it through. But you do need those moments. You need those moments where you're able to kind of dedicate strictly towards, figuring out, asking yourself the tough questions before you venture out.
Can you highlight on company, because you had said at the beginning that you had to remove yourself out of the company of people, and it talks about bad company corrupts good morals. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that and just how, because I feel like that's an underrated portion of whether it be isolation or aloneness, because it's like I want to keep, like you said, I want to keep this, but I also want to be this. And at some point in time, you're going to find that the person you want to be and the person you are going to disagree on certain things.
Absolutely.
And you're most likely going to revert to the person you are rather than the person that you want to be, because that's what I know. And I know if I do this, it'll produce this. If I do the things that I think may get me to where I want to be, I might not get the results I want instantly. Right. So then what does that really look like, as far as like whether it be like bad company, good company, or how are you even able to tell the difference for somebody who's not?
Well, first and foremost is that there's a lot of people that will give you, like, there's a lot of people that bring a good time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so a good time is obviously a good time.
Yeah.
But a good time expires because a good time sometimes hangs on what is convenient in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So there are certain people come in your life,
Mm-hmm.
right, that will bring a good time,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a purpose that they're trying to fulfill. There's a purpose that you're trying to fulfill, and you guys just get gravitated to each other,
Yeah.
right? Because of common, it's just convenient for
Yeah.
the moment. And then there are people where they don't just bring a good time, well, I would hope they bring a good time,
Yeah.
but there are some people where it's almost like you have to, like, you know, that saying that says that, like, show me your friends and I'll show you your future,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is you have to almost plan for who do I want to be 5 years from now,
Mm-hmm.
and what are the steps that I'm actually willing to take? What am I willing to actually give up?
Mm-hmm.
What are the sacrifices I'm willing to make to be that person? So it's almost like, it's not like I'm getting there, but like one of the things for me is I was 18 years old at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew that God was calling me to full-time ministry to become a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't, so where I had to come to was, Jess, don't think like someone who's going to be a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
Think like someone who is.
Mm.
And so in that moment, I kid you not,
Mm-hmm.
I used to do some of the most cheesiest, tackiest things. I would line up stuffed animals,
Uh-huh.
and I would preach to them. And I would... And
Is
I
that
would,
18?
Yeah.
Jeez.
16, 18. I'm like, I needed an audience.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the audience. So I was like, well, these stuffed animals,
Yeah.
that's an audience right there. And so
Yeah.
I would literally see, and I would visualize myself
Mm-hmm.
in the position of either a preacher or a pastor,
Mm-hmm.
doing the very thing that God called me to do.
Mm-hmm.
It looks silly on the outside. It looks silly, like if you were to watch me do it, because
Yeah.
I'm just standing up
I'm
there.
envisioning it right now.
And I'm just going at it, and I'm walking back and forth, but I needed to see it.
Mm-hmm.